My grandmother and I had a very close relationship. She practically raised me since I was a child, and we have always been very attached to each other. We spent a lot of time together, and she always made sure that I was taken care of. She had always told me that I would inherit a little bit more than everyone else. My no contact cousin and I had never been close. She was always a bit of a manipulator, even when we were children. She would try to get her way no matter what it took. I had always been wary of her and kept my distance. We had not spoken in years, and I had not heard from her in a long time. When I visited my grandma, I was shocked to see my cousin there since we hadn't seen or heard from her in years. I greeted her politely, but something felt off. My grandmother, who was usually bright and cheerful, looked visibly upset. I knew something was wrong, and I had to find out what it was. I tried to engage my cousin in small talk, but she was vague and evasive. I didn't want to push her, so I turned my attention to my grandmother. She told me that my cousin had paid her a surprise visit and that they were catching up. However, the more she spoke, the more I realized that something was amiss. My grandmother seemed hesitant to speak her mind in front of my cousin, and that's when it hit me. My cousin was manipulating her. I didn't know how or why, but I knew that I had to act fast to protect my grandmother. I left soon after, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I decided to do some digging and investigate what was going on behind the scenes. It wasn't easy since my cousin had cut off all contact with our family years ago. However, I was determined to find out what she was up to. I was worried and confused about what I saw, so I started digging for more information. I asked my grandma about her visits with my cousin and what they talked about, but she was always vague and would change the subject. I decided to hire a private investigator to follow my cousin and gather information on her activities. The investigator found out that my cousin had been secretly meeting with my grandma for months and was manipulating her into changing her will to make my cousin the sole beneficiary of her estate. My cousin had even convinced my grandma to disinherit me and my siblings by telling her lies about us and turning her against us. After finding out about my cousin's manipulation of my grandmother, I decided to share my discovery with my family. The family was shocked and upset by the news. They all gathered to discuss what to do next. They agreed that she, our cousin, needed to be confronted and that legal action should be taken if necessary. I contacted a lawyer and we started gathering evidence to prove my cousin's manipulative behavior. We found out that she had been convincing Grandma to change her will and make her the sole beneficiary. This was a clear case of undue influence. As we delved deeper into the matter, we received another report from private investigator. It stated that my cousin had been involved in a fraud scheme and had been borrowing money from my grandma to cover her tracks. I was heartbroken to hear this. How could my own cousin do this to our family? And how could my sweet grandma fall prey to her manipulations? I shared this news information with my family, and it only added to the frustration and anger we all felt. We knew we had to act fast to protect my grandma's assets and ensure that justice was served. Our lawyer advised us to gather as much evidence as possible before we went to court. The next few weeks were filled with tension and anxiety. We were all worried about what would happen in court and whether we would be able to prove our case against my cousin. We had to be careful not to upset my grandma, who was still oblivious to the situation. But we continued to dig deeper and gather more evidence. It was hard work, but we were determined to see it through to the end. We discovered that my cousin had been using my grandma's money to fund her lavish lifestyle and pay off her debts. Surprised to hear from her, as she had cut off contact with the family for years. As my family and I prepared for the court case, I received a call from my cousin. I was surprised to hear from her as she had cut off contact with the family for years. She asked if we could meet to discuss things before the court case. I consulted my lawyer and he told me to record the conversation just in case. I agreed to meet her, but I was cautious. During the meeting, my cousin tried to justify her actions, saying that she was struggling financially and needed the money. She tried to convince me to drop the case and work out a deal where we could both get a share of the inheritance. But I knew that wasn't the right thing to do. I left the meeting feeling more resolved than ever to expose my cousin's actions in court. I knew that my grandma deserved better and that my cousin needed to be held accountable for her actions. The day of the court case arrived and tensions were high. As we sat in the courtroom, my cousin looked nervous, and I could see the anger in her eyes. But it was too late. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and the judge ruled in our favor. He ruled in favor of my family, and the inheritance would be divided as originally intended. As we all let out a sigh of relief, my cousin let out a blood-curdling scream. She was furious and seemed to be on the verge of a breakdown. "You're all lying! You're trying to steal what's rightfully mine!" she shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. The judge quickly ordered the bailiff to calm her down and escort her out of the courtroom. As she dragged out, still yelling obscenities, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for her. She had ruined her own chance at any type of relationship with our family, and now her true intentions were revealed. After the court proceedings, my family and I went out to celebrate our victory, but even though we had won, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal and hurt. It was a bittersweet victory. While I was relieved that justice had been served, it was hard to see my cousin go through the consequences of her actions. She was ordered to pay back every single penny that she had taken from my grandma. And now that she has been exposed for fraud, there will be another hearing. She will have to serve jail time. But I knew that we had done the right thing and that our grandma's legacy was protected. Over the following days, I went to visit my grandmother and update her on everything that had happened in court. I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal. I had always been close to my grandma, but now I felt like I didn't even know her. The fact that she had been so easily manipulated by my cousin hurt me deeply. My cousin didn't even have much of a relationship or as deep a relationship as I did with Grandma. When I visited her later that day, she was visibly upset. She apologized profusely, telling me how sorry she was for causing all this trouble. She admitted that she had been naive and foolish to trust my cousin, and that she should have listened to me when I raised my concerns. As much as I wanted to be angry with her, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. She was clearly torn between her love for me and her guilt for falling for my cousin's lies. It was clear that she was regretful of her actions, and I could see the pain in her eyes. I reassured her that I didn't blame her and I still loved her, but our relationship would never be the same again. The trust that we had built over the years had been shattered, and it would take time to rebuild. Despite her apologies, I could still sense the guilt in her voice. It was evident that she was struggling to come to terms with what had happened, and I knew that it would take her time to heal. In the end, all I could do was forgive her and hope that she would learn from her mistakes. I knew that our relationship would never be the same again, but I was willing to work towards rebuilding it. After all, she was my grandma, and I loved her no matter what. Update 1. A month had passed since the incident in court, and the family had gathered again at Grandma's house. This time the mood was much lighter, and everyone was smiling and laughing. We had been visiting Grandma more often. It was our way of assuring her that we still loved and cared for her. We didn't want her to feel alone and isolated, especially after what had happened. Grandma took a deep breath and looked at each one of us in turn. I wanted to apologize to all of you for what happened, she said, her voice shaky with emotion. We all exchanged surprised glances, not expecting Grandma to take the initiative to speak up like this. I was blinded by my love for your cousin, and I made a terrible mistake, she continued. But you were all right. She had been manipulating me, and I'm so sorry for what she did to you. We could all see how genuinely sorry Grandma was, and we each took turns hugging her and reassuring her that we had forgiven her. It was a relief to finally put all this behind us and move forward as a family. NTA, I can't believe the nerve of that cousin. To manipulate and take advantage of her own grandmother like that is just despicable. It's sickening to think that someone could be so self-centered and greedy. It makes me sick to my stomach knowing that people like her exist in this world. The way she treated OP and her family is just awful. I hope she gets what she deserves for what she did. No one should be allowed to treat their family like that and get away with it. NTA, it takes a lot of courage and determination to stand up to someone like that cousin. I'm proud of OP for taking action and not backing down. She did what needed to be done to protect her grandmother and her family's inheritance. It's not easy to go up against someone who has been manipulating your loved one for months, but she did it with grace and strength. Next story. My boyfriend John and I have a nice relationship. The most stable one I ever had for sure. He is a great person who is appreciated by both my family and my friends and who makes me a better person. John had always been extremely patient and sometimes too kind, which is why his behavior that I will talk about is bothering me a lot. For context, John lost his mother 3 years ago on the evening of the 24th of December. My parents and I live in Germany. However, my parents are English, so this year it was decided that Christmas would be spent in the UK, and of course I invited John. The 24th had been a day John always spent with his grandmother. However, the tickets were cheaper on the 24th to go to the UK, and even though I proposed to go on the 25th, John told me it was okay to leave on the 24th. So we left. The first part of the journey we were with one of my father's closest friends who just lost his wife. So everyone was in mourning and it was a difficult atmosphere. Also, the 2 days family and rest of the time alone time with John was reduced to spending time with one of my family members every day and having no time to ourselves. Me and my siblings argued. My parents argued. Siblings, me, and parents argued. It was horrible, but John stayed calm and comprehensive. We came back in the morning of the 31st, slept, and then spent time with some of my friends. John was okay, not himself, but not unpleasant. Afterwards, we went out. John isn't particularly for that kind of music we listened to at the party, hardcore metal. But whenever I asked if he was okay, he said yes. At a certain moment, we went to another party in a small venue. There was also hardcore metal. I know John doesn't like hardcore metal. I told him before. I told him he could go home whenever he wanted. He seemed pissed at a certain moment, told me he wanted to go home. I told him, stay for another 20 minutes, make an effort. This was at 4 in the morning. John then lost it and said, I spent the 24th and 25th with your arguing family. I have done enough effort. I started crying. He told me how he would have wanted to be with his family, which he didn't express to me before, and then John left. And in front of my friends, he gave me a kiss on the cheek, which shocked everyone. I told him when I came home that in no way did I appreciate him arguing with me in public, that he ruined my party and that he is a party pooper for behaving in this way, and that I expect him to apologize to all my friends who were at the party. TLDR. AITA for telling him he ruined my NYE and to ask him to apologize to my friends? So let me get this straight. You took your boyfriend on an unpleasant holiday that started with mourning and continued with constant arguing among your family for a week when you were supposed to have some quality couples time. Then went to two different NYE parties where he didn't know anyone but you and didn't like the music. You told him he could go at any time, but even though you'd kept him out until 4 a.m., you pressed him to make an effort and stay longer when he finally had enough. You tried the patience of a saint. It sounds like this entire holiday has been conflict and stress, and him being accommodating, and he finally snapped because you'd promised all night to be accommodating, but pressured him when he finally had enough. And now you're throwing a tantrum because you finally hit the end of a generous partner's patience and tolerance. Of course, YTA, you're the one who owes him an apology. YTA, Jesus. Ignoring all the other BS you and your family put him through, you had just told him to leave whenever he wanted. You knew he wasn't a fan of that genre of music. So when he says that he wants to take you up on the offer and leave, you tell him he's not making an effort? How short-sighted are you? Or is this just straight narcissism? Next story. My wife is a teacher and refuses to work over breaks. She's 32 and I'm 31. We're both women. We live in a high cost of living city. We need to live in the city for her job because of the union rules. I work from home about 40 to 45 hours a week at my main job. Then I work at about 10 to 15 hours a week at a part-time job outside the home. I also help my brother with his business, which is usually only about 4 or so hours a week, but he pays me. Recently, we've needed to adjust our budget a lot because of rising costs. We're trying to afford to put down a down payment on a condo in the city closer to her school, which is in a richer neighborhood. We both have loans and medical issues that take up a lot of our budget. Our rent is going up and something has to give. Her commute is already about an hour each way. Because I work from home and my part-time job is close and only about 10 to 15 hours a week, she wants me to get another job. My brother can't offer me any more work than he's giving me. I told her absolutely not, and she needs to work over the summer and winter breaks instead. She blew up at me and says her job is extremely difficult, and I don't understand how much she needs the summer and winter off. I know that her job is tough, but she is claiming she needs the summer break, otherwise she will get burnt out and depressed. I'm already burnt out and depressed working so much, and now she wants me to do even more. Some of my friends are saying I'm an a-hole because being a teacher is much harder than the jobs I have. Some of my friends are saying she's the a-hole because I'm already working multiple jobs and she gets the summer and winter off. AITA for telling my wife I won't get a job and she needs to get another job. NTA, you are working 54 to 64 hours a week. Teaching is certainly a more than 40-hour week occupation. I'm married to one. However, there is no reason that she cannot pick up a part-time summer job that is something she genuinely enjoys. A baker, Uber, part-time editing from home. The options are endless, and surely there is something within her interest that will not be adding a lot of stress because it's not teaching over the summer. She's the a-hole for insisting that you work more than her, and using her job as a reason for why that should be. Would she be willing to compromise on a smaller apartment? If not, then she needs to look at ways to contribute to keep what you've got or get what you want. NTA, you have 3 jobs working at least 60 hours a week already. She has 1 job. My ex was a teacher and several of my friends are too, so I know that some breeze through it and some struggle and have to work a lot of hours. It's not always an easy or lucrative job. Ultimately, she has more hours available than you for an additional job. If she's not willing, then you may not get that condo. And if money's tight, how will you pay for the increased taxes? For the AC that broke? For the water leak that ruined the floors? And you need to replace the dishwasher, etc., etc. I suppose it might be a discussion about if her job is lucrative enough or if she needs to get another one that pays better, and maybe the same for you. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.